Welcome to Not Another CEO podcast. I'm your host, David Politis. Every week, we talk to inspiring leaders and get the true stories, the ups and downs, the lessons learned, and come away with actionable advice for our own journeys. Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you for listening. Whether this is the first episode you're listening to or you've been listening from the beginning, I truly appreciate it. You are why I do this podcast, and it's a labor of love, and it's only worth doing if people are listening and getting value from it. It would really mean a lot to me if you would subscribe and rate the show on whatever platform is your favorite and share it with the people in your network, people who you think could benefit from it. It helps me get reach and discoverability for people. So please, I would love if you would do that. So let's get into today's episode. For those of you that follow me on LinkedIn or listen to my end of year reflections episode, you know that one of the things that I've challenged myself with this year in 2025 is to find a way to package up and surface the learnings from all the episodes I've done so far and going forward, just in an easy to digest way. When I look back and I think about kind of where we've done that successfully, actually the most successful episode last year was the episode on November 26th. It's the compilation episode where we featured each guest's answer to my first question that I ask everyone. The question of what is the one thing you've done, big or small, that's had the biggest impact, and you'll absolutely do again if you're CEO of another company in the future. The feedback I got on that episode was people loved listening to the answers back to back to back. They liked having different CEOs' voices in the same episode. And a couple of people told me they actually went back and listened to it multiple times. And even though it was a couple of hours, like it really packed in the lessons and the content. So I figured we'll give the people what they want, and we'll do another one of those compilation type episodes. So that's what we're doing today. So we're actually going to go to the end of each episode. And that's when I ask the guests the question. I ask almost every guest this question, which is, knowing everything you know today, what is the one piece of advice you'd go back and give yourself before you started your career? This has actually become one of my favorite parts of the interviews because it's like at the point when I ask the question at the end of an hour, the guest has already gone through all their lessons, all these experiences that they had. I think I kind of get them in this reflection mode, and we get really authentic answers to the question. And I find myself, sometimes when people are giving me the answer, I find myself thinking, wow, I wish I had that piece of advice early in my career. And it's not just that the advice, I mean, some of the things are maybe things that are semi-obvious, but it's not even that. It's the way that people word it. It's really concise, thought-provoking. I find it easy to remember the way that they say it. And so I went through and I selected some of my favorite answers to that question. And again, things that I really wish I knew. And I like this because these are things that are relevant to you as a CEO, to a leader. Frankly, anyone in their professional career can use this advice. It is truly relevant to everyone. And so I'm going to go through and give you my favorites. But before I do that, I'm going to actually share with you my one piece of advice. And if I had to sum it all up, if I had to give myself a really one concise piece of advice, it would be trust your gut. That really has to do with everything, right? You think about, I think about these experiences where I'm interviewing people early in my career. I'm young. I'm in my early 20s. I'm interviewing candidates for a job, and I can feel if they're good, not like specifically for the role I'm hiring at the company I'm running, and I would let investors or some senior executive I hired or a group of employees that had interviewed the person really convince me to go against my gut. And that was in both directions, but most of the time when I felt like people weren't a good fit and we'd hire them. And I'd say I was correct 90% of the time. I mean, usually that spidey sense, like about that yellow or red flag, turned out to be right. And I wish I trusted my gut on that. It could have to do with strategies or initiatives or things that you're doing. I have very, very distinct memories of being in the room with a ad agency that we had hired, a marketing agency, and they were helping us with some campaign, and they did this massive presentation, and they worked with this brand and this famous brand, and it was really a really bad idea. And we were paying them a lot of money for it. But again, I felt like, well, they've worked with all these other brands. They have much more experience than I have, and I should trust them. And I feel like every time I've gone against my gut, I missed in one way or another. And so when I think about it, that's my piece of advice. And I think it has to do with imposter syndrome a lot. Like I think we all have imposter syndrome to some level. And even though I've had a quote unquote successful career, I still have it. I talk to CEOs who have sold their companies for multiple billions of dollars, and they still have it. And I think when you have that imposter syndrome, it kind of holds you back sometimes from making that call and going with that gut feel. And to me, I kind of think about it and say, if I can make a decision now by going with my gut, and I can be right 90% of the time, but make the decision 90% faster or 50% faster or something like that, then it's worth it. And so, anyway, if you can tell, I have definitely a lot of scars from this, but that's the advice that I would give myself, and I still have to give myself, frankly, as I think about it. So, with that, now we're going to go to our guests' pieces of advice. I'm really excited about these. So we're going to get going, and I'll just introduce each guest before you hear them speaking. So, first off, we've got Tom Buiocchi. He's the former CEO of Service Channel. Here we go.
A couple words come to mind. So, authenticity comes to mind. There have been parts of my career where I tried to be someone I wasn't, kind of thing, right? Either to be better part of the team that I was with, or get out of my comfort zone. I never was really good at that, right? I think the resilient thing is important. You're going to play this game for a long time, right? You got to be able to handle it, right? The ups and downs. The one thing I think I tell myself that again, looking back now, is I thought there are points, times in my career where I thought I needed to be the hero, right? I'm going to go into Drobo. I'm going to fix that company, right? I'm going to be the guy. I'm going to get involved in every level of detail. I'm going to make it successful with my will, and I'm going to get in there and do it. Well, it turns out that annoys the crap out of everybody, and it always is not the best way to build a team, kind of thing. And I think at Service Channel, I was by no means the hero, right? It was great. I may have helped a team of heroes, come together as a team and give some direction and so forth, and enable them to be heroes. But I felt much better with that approach than I got to carry it on my back and I'm going to get the ball over the goal line myself. So I think that's, again, personal styles are different, but there's no need to be the hero, right? And I think a lot of people need to tell themselves that.
Okay. Next up, Loren Castle, founder and CEO, Sweet Loren's.
I think it would be don't play small, like really give yourself permission, even as a young founder or first-time founder, to dream big. It took me a while to feel comfortable and confident to allow myself to dream big. And I deserved that from the very beginning. So really, like, let yourself dream big. You deserve it, as long as you have the passion and energy and focus to go after something, that big. And also, it's all about the team. Like, I would realize your strengths and what you're passionate about very quickly and outsource the rest as soon as possible, and really make sure, whether it's a recruiter, even if it's expensive, but just leaning on a recruiter or whoever can really help you get the right people on board as fast as possible. Because people are the hardest things to find. And but they're the gateway to growing, to figuring out the right marketing, the right operations, the right, tighter finance, like whatever it is, and hiring a president. I should have hired a president 5 years ago. I say this all the time to Doug, but at the same time, I probably couldn't have attracted, Doug, until the business was at a certain level. So, you got to kind of, not be so hard on yourself as well. But team is everything, dreaming big. And then, I would say bringing on a mentor, especially if they've been in your industry. I do think it's more helpful, that can really help you finesse a business plan over the next, and I like doing like 3-year increment business plans, but like a business plan so that like you are clear on what success looks like, you have really thought out your strategy, and that you can just kind of everyday focus on what matters versus getting distracted by shiny objects. Or I think it took me the first couple of years, like I think it was early to market too, which was hard because you're early to market, not everyone understands what you're doing. Now everyone understands what we're doing. And I'm like, but yeah, we've been here for 10 years, people, waiting for you to catch up. But I think those are the big things to me is making sure, like I think we could have moved faster with and also access to data. Again, I scrappy at the beginning, I didn't have money, but getting access to data so that you can really build a very smart business plan that's rooted in data, and you can really understand why are you going for certain categories? How big are they? What percentage of the market can you bring? Are you incremental to the category? When would you launch into new products? Like really setting up a business plan that really makes sense. And I think it keeps you and everyone on the team very focused and ensures success.
Ryan Westwood, CEO, Full Cast.
It's your direction that's most important, not your speed. I always am focused on speed, but if I would have slowed down and focused on direction, like some of the things we talked about, which was the ICP, the differentiation, getting the delivery right to the customer, whether it's a product or service, slowing down and making sure that I'm pointed in the right direction, I would just charge forward and believe that it would work out. And I believe now I'm more surgical and methodical, and then I don't waste any time or effort. And it's almost like when you look at LeBron right now, later in his career, it's like he might not be as athletic, but he knows exactly his basketball IQ is off the charts. I hope that that's what I can do, is my IQ from an entrepreneurial perspective continues to increase, and I'm able to do more with less. But that's what because I'll tell you, I got into some serious problems with cash flow and things early in my career because I didn't realize that you actually have to manage growth. I grew faster, even though we were profitable. Cash flows went upside down because we weren't collecting as fast as we were spending. And I didn't understand that. And so in my 20s, I went through all these painful cash crunches and almost going out of business because I was not slowing down and being strategic.
Ryan Simonetti, founder, CEO, Convene.
I'd say 2. The first is only work with people you like, respect, and trust. Keyword: respect and trust. I believe you are a reflection of the people closest to you. And I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for the mentors and, like, I call it this personal board of advisors that, by the way, it has changed over time, but it has been a staple in my career. And when I was young and just starting out, I think I was too, I don't want to say immature, but I didn't appreciate or understand the importance and value of that until I was a little bit older. And I wish I had made a commitment right away to kind of building that like professional, personal board of advisors and mentors like right away. And then I'd say the second is patience. We live in a world of instant gratification. You look at the success of other founders that, they start their company and 12 months later, they're doing $100 million round at a crazy valuation and they exit. And I think the reality is that is not the norm. And most successful entrepreneurs, family businesses, it's a commitment over a very, very long period of time. I've been doing this for 15 years of my life. I'm 42, almost 43 years old. And I'm just getting started with Convene. And so I think understanding that while time is precious and scarce, success is a long game, not a short game. And kind of trusting the process and being okay that it may take 10, it may take 15, it may take 20, and being willing to kind of continue to put in the work day in, day out over very long periods of time.
Nick Cromydas, co-founder and CEO at Hunt Club.
I would tell myself that, and you and I actually spoke about this before, I think there's a really interesting thing that happens to an entrepreneur or a founder as you build a business, that like you learn nothing really is fatal except for the things that are actually truly fatal. But like, the big things that happen early on in a business when you're a couple people or growing up, it's like, you lose a match, or like in business, your early employee leaves to go somewhere else, or you lose a big customer, or you push something out that's super buggy, and like you lament over these things for weeks, months, sometimes even years, and like you hold on to them. And I think the thing I would tell myself is if you keep focusing on the big picture stuff and handle the small stuff with grace, you can get to a point where you can build something pretty successful. And I think, one thing that I love is like this framework around speed to resiliency. Whereas like in the early days, if you're an entrepreneur, something bad happens, it like might take your legs out for weeks, and like you can't get back on the horse because you don't know how to emotionally rationalize it or manage it. And then as you have like more and more things happen to you, and you realize like basically it's just a journey of compounding stuff happening that is negative and or positive, you just get faster at getting over like some of the small issues. A key teammate leaves, everyone's got a journey or a path that isn't always like your business. A customer leaves, let's get better and figure out how we can improve upon that way. And so now I think the stuff that used to take me out of whack for weeks or months now is minutes. And I think I would tell myself, focus on the big picture, keep on prioritizing things that are most important. And of course there's gonna be 1,000 things that come your way, but don't sweat them, and feel them, embrace them, don't ignore them, but focus on the big things. Cause at the end of the day, it's, you do a couple of the big things really right, that is good enough to really build something special.
I think that summary, speed to resiliency, is such a good way of describing that attribute. When you say that, what goes through my mind is I remember the first person who quit, the first really good person that I ever worked with at Vocalocity, and they quit. And I think it really, I was upset for, I think, a month. I think for a month, I really thought to myself, like, how could I have lost that person? What am I going to do? What can I do without that person? They were the only person who could do X, Y, Z, and you really think about, you lose a customer and it's out of your control. Something happens, whatever it is, and it lasts with you for this long period of time. And when you have that, it really slows you down so
Totally.
much, and so I love that speed to resilience. Like if you can, and I don't know if there's a way to train yourself to be faster at that, or if it's just through the reps and of dealing with it. But I love that line, because I do think that sets people apart, right? If you have to be able to, right? You get the text from the CEO that says we're not going to buy the company, and then you get the text from the investor saying we're not going to invest, and you could attempt to change it. You could be depressed for a year, but those things aren't going to actually help you be successful. Adam Bryant, Senior Managing Director, Exco Group.
I think I would probably tell myself to enjoy the journey more, because I've always been very goal oriented and very much like, achievements. Like I need to do this and accomplish this, and and I don't mean in terms of title, because I've actually turned down 2 promotions in my career, so I've never been focused on like I got to get to that next rung, but more like accomplishing different things, and so. Sometimes I feel like the way my brain works, I'm sometimes scanning the horizon too much, instead of like being present and enjoying this. Cause like, and partly like I was an editor for 15 years at the New York Times and Newsweek. It's like, your job is to scan the horizon, right? Like what are we missing? The story's breaking. Like, what are the 5 angles that could play out? Like what else is going on? And trying to spot patterns and see what's missing. I mean, it's almost like being an idea entrepreneur. Like nobody's articulated this insight. And so the way my brain works is partly it's just that kind of like constantly scanning the horizon. So I think my advice to myself, and I'm working on it now, partly why like I'm living in New Orleans where our 2 daughters moved. But New Orleans is a great place to sort of like, the vibe here is just like, do what you're doing when you're doing it and enjoy it. And it's I like living here because it's a good counterweight for me, because more naturally I'm like scanning that horizon, living in the future a bit.
I love that advice. I could probably use that. Melanie Fellay, co-founder and CEO, Speckit.
Be yourself. And for me, that's like, I have opinions and I speak up and I put my hand up if there's a problem and I think I can solve it. And I think that served me really well early on in my career. So I'd say do more of that. I think sometimes I was like afraid to speak up in a room if there was, other people there, but I think I would tell myself to do more of that. I think at the end of the day, the right people will gravitate towards you. Then you'll get really clear on the kind of people that you work really well with or not.
Love it. Be yourself. I like it. Simple, but actually a good reminder. I interviewed someone the other day and they said, stop self-censoring yourself, and it's the same thing. I actually think it's just important. You have an opinion, you should voice it.
Yeah.
And I think, at least for me, I think for most people early in your career, you self-censor a lot, even later. But, so I really like that. Be yourself. So hopefully you like that one from Melanie. That to me is a little bit of the trust your gut kind of advice, right? Be yourself. You have opinions, speak up. If you feel something, you should speak up. Okay, next up, Dan Michaeli, co-founder and CEO, Glia.
Well, I would say that probably sticking with my classic follow up and follow through would be the best advice that I could give myself. It may seem at points where you are stagnating or there isn't a breakthrough or you're running up against something that feels impossible to overcome. And I've really stuck with follow up and follow through. And that I feel like that reminder to myself in the early years would have been helpful, because, sometimes you can get discouraged. It's really challenging at the beginning and even, throughout to maintain persistence, but it's as simple as follow up and follow through. Make sure that you have the persistence. Make sure that when follow up relates to persistence and follow through relates to reliability. So anytime you encounter a situation, have you followed up enough that there are no angles left to play? And for follow through is when you encounter a situation, did you do what you said you were going to do? Right. And so I think like adhering to that maxim, making sure that's top of mind from beginning to end is what I would tell myself if I could go back.
I actually think that's great advice for anyone in any job at any level. Follow up and follow through. I think that's one that it's somehow in that you kind of encapsulate everything that actually, if I think about the best people that I've worked with, period, that probably describes those people, is that they have that persistence and they do what they say they're going to do. Actually, if you go around and ask people, who's the best person you ever worked with? Probably they're going to say something to that effect. And when you say that, I think about myself earlier in my career, and you think to yourself, like, when you start working, I don't know how you felt. When I started working, you got some nervousness, that first job, am I going to be able to live up to the thing? Will I be successful? And then when you get into the working world, you actually realize it's not that difficult. If you follow up and follow through, you'll be better than 90% of the people that you work with.
100%. And it creates a bulletproof reputation. You know, if you can consistently do those two things, your reputation will precede you anywhere you go. And people will quickly realize it too. Like you can quickly tell if somebody has those two qualities when they start working with you.
I like that. It's a simple way of actually encapsulating everything. Howard Ting, CEO, Cyberhaven.
Probably the thing I wish I knew then that I know now is there's a certain pacing, I think, to a career. It's like, I used to be a DJ, as I mentioned earlier, and, DJs don't just run the big hits and the high intensity music, like for the 60-minute set that they run, right? They go up and down and up and down. And I think there's that kind of like that same rhythm to a career. When I started my career, it was just like everything fast all the time, like high intensity, just keep taking them, the most challenging job. And I think I would probably tell my younger self, like, there are times to slow down in a career and there are times to really step on the gas and go intense. And I think it's about finding that rhythm in your career that really can, make it a much more enjoyable journey. Because for me, when I was just like high intensity, always on, it probably made it less enjoyable for me. I think there are times when I wish I just kind of slowed down and just enjoyed the success more. Like, for example, I was part of a great company, Palo Alto Networks, and I left because I thought, I got to go do the next big challenging thing. I probably should have just chilled out and enjoyed that journey for a couple more years. Same thing with some of the other companies. But I'm always like getting restless and wanting to challenge myself and keep the pace and intensity of my growth and development high. But I wish I could have moderated that at times and just like allowed myself to slow down and enjoy it a little more.
Andrew Lau, co-founder and CEO, Jellyfish.
Just follow folks and gigs that you're learning and have fun with. Is like dead freaking simple. It is like just learn from folks, follow them. If you like working with them, keep working with them. And if you're getting challenged and learning new things, then stick with it. If they're jerks, if they treat you badly, if you're not like you're doing stuff that you're not excited about, don't do it. Like, it's dead simple. And that's where I'm cheesy. Like, I think the world works itself out around that.
Next up, Kathryn Minshew, co-founder and former CEO, The Muse.
The one that's coming to mind is just like, it's all going to be okay. I think that, and it doesn't mean, by the way, that I got what I wanted. In fact, like, I had crushing failure. I started a company before The Muse. It was essentially The Muse V0, with my Muse co-founder and 2 other women, and it exploded in a painful ball of flames, otherwise known as a co-founder dispute. And I spent 3 weeks in the fetal position. The way that the Muse ended, there are things about that I wish I could change. With the, we brought in a private equity firm, and at the same point, like, I think, like, I wish I could just be like, you're gonna be okay. And if we're getting more tactical, I think probably should have hired a COO earlier. That's high on my tactical list. But I think the lessons are part of it. So yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna marinate on that.
No, it's going to be okay. I think is a really important thing for founders to hear, because there are days where it feels like, especially when it's your company, it's your whole world for most founders. And so, I think that's excellent. I love that advice. Nathan Rosenstock, co-founder and CEO, Crafty.
I think there is a lot of value in constraints that I didn't really appreciate as much until right now. And it's this idea of like, pressure creates diamonds, and like, you have to like, destroy your muscle to build muscle. Like the struggle is where the value is. And I think constraints for entrepreneurs in particular is like one of the most valuable things you can have. Like if you have a small team, hell yeah, like you're faster. You don't need to have a huge team to be successful, to build product market fit. If you don't need to raise money, don't. Or if you can raise less, raise less. Like this idea of just adding resources is not a strategy. And I think it's baggage. And, if you can really survive and thrive in an environment of less, you'll end up building something better. You'll end up being more successful. You'll have more ownership. I think too, just like this like silver spoon concept. And I'm definitely was a victim of this too, which was, hey, Northwestern graduate, McKinsey consulting, and then I'm going to start a business. And you don't really know what you're doing until you do it. You don't know how to be effective and efficient until you've built the skills to be successful. And so if you bring on too many resources, I think you end up getting sort of slower, stodgier. You end up putting out probably worse product or less product. And, on the next one for sure, like just in continuing in our current business today, like I'm thinking about this today, is just creating constraints, because I think constraints can inspire innovation and great ideas, and living in a world of just like total comfort. I don't know. I just don't think you can be as successful in that type of environment. I think it's got to be hard. The harder it is, probably the more successful you'll be. Things are easy and going smoothly. Like it sounds like trouble. If it's like, hey, everything's going well, it's all good. I'm like, something's up. Like, I don't know. But yeah, I would say the value of constraints is the big thing that I would definitely reemphasize.
Last but definitely not least, Godard Abel, co-founder and CEO, G2.
I do think I wish I'd started working on like my consciousness, my mindset earlier. And maybe it was a bit of a luxury, but I remember it was about 9 years in the big machines where I first hired Jim Dethimer as a conscious leadership coach.
What does that mean, conscious leadership?
And there's a whole website, conscious.is if people really want to go deep. But the high level story is becoming a more self-aware human and leader. I was thinking one of the first things Jim actually had me do, and I'd never done it before, was like meditate and breathe. And I remember after I did it with him, he did me like a 5-minute exercise. I'm like, Jim, this is wonderful. Like it cleared my head, but I just feel tired. I have no energy, without all the anxiety and adrenaline, I can't work. And then he kind of just laughed and he's like, oh, that's kind of normal when you first experience it, but I think doing more, I think the idea would be you can lead more from a place of ease and flow. So it's not just anxiety fueling you. It's not just fear of failure. And I still have that, but it's also like you can be aware and present and not full of anxiety, which was like my first 10 years as an entrepreneur, and still do great work. And so it's kind of a shift to working from what they call above the line, being more conscious, more free flowing. So it doesn't feel as effortful. And hopefully you're actually being a better leader and getting better work done.
Interesting. I did conscious.is.
Conscious is. And conscious leadership. And they have a bunch of great content. But certainly I wish it was about 10 years in for me where I started applying that. And it's just made the journey feel a lot better ever since.
Okay, that's it. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you took something away from this. I hope you share this with your network, with people who are going to find value from it. You can always reach me, david@politisprojects.com. I'll take any feedback, thoughts, ideas. So hopefully you enjoy, and we look forward to seeing you for the next episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, please visit notanotherceopodcast.com. We'll see you next week.